It began as an ordinary plan for one final adventure, a simple weekend hike before life pulled three inseparable friends in different directions. But what was supposed to be a farewell trip became one of the most unsettling and unexplained disappearance cases in the Pacific Northwest. Three experienced hikers, a forgotten trail, and a series of discoveries years later that defied every law of nature and technology. How does a fully charged satellite phone remain untouched for 3 years in the wild, and who placed the mysterious call from a number that has never existed? If you want to uncover these questions with me, then like this video, subscribe to Unscripted Tales, and help me reach 5,000 likes because that is my target from my mother, so let us achieve it together for her. Aiden Clark, Noah Patel, and Sofia Ramirez have been inseparable ever since a high school field trip to Mount Rainier brought them together. It was supposed to be an educational outing for their environmental science class, but a shared detention for sneaking off the designated trail sparked a bond that lasted for 8 years. From that day forward, they spent countless weekends exploring waterfalls, hidden lakes, and remote paths that most people had never even heard of. It was their escape from the world, their way of holding on to youth even as life pushed them toward adulthood. But in September of 2016, everything began to change. Aiden had been accepted into a graduate program at Stanford, Noah had just secured his dream job with a Seattle-based engineering firm, and Sofia had been chosen for a long-term wildlife research project that would keep her deep in the Colorado wilderness for months at a time. Their tradition of spontaneous adventures was about to end, and none of them were ready to let go. It was on an otherwise ordinary Friday evening at Miller's Diner, their familiar meeting spot, that the realization truly hit. Between half-empty coffee mugs and plates of pie, their conversation shifted from playful to reflective. Noah was the first to break the silence with an idea that would change everything. We need one last adventure. Something we will remember for the rest of our lives when everything else gets boring. Sofia leaned forward, her eyes brightening as if a memory had just sparked. She told them about something she had overheard at the outdoor gear store where she worked part-time. 2 older customers had been talking about a forgotten trail deep in the Cascade Wilderness, one that had been officially closed since 2003 but was still technically accessible to anyone brave enough to find it. It was called Hollow Ridge Trail, a name that none of them had heard before. Hollow Ridge Trail had been a hidden treasure for experienced hikers back in the 1990s, known for its untouched beauty and views that stretched farther than the eye could see. But a massive landslide in 2003 destroyed a key section of the ridge, and the state declared it too dangerous to maintain. Officially, it had been closed ever since. Yet, Sofia explained that some locals believed there were still ways to bypass the damaged section if you knew where to look. Her voice carried that same spark of mischief that had once gotten them into detention years earlier. That was all it took. Over pie crust crumbs and cooling coffee, they decided they were going. One final trip before their lives pulled them apart. They would leave on Saturday morning, hike in, camp overnight, and return Sunday evening. Simple. Memorable. Entirely theirs. Aiden was already picturing the wilderness footage he could capture with his brand new GoPro. Noah grinned at the thought of testing out his drone in a place no one had flown over in years. But it was Sofia who surprised them most. She described her preparations with precision, from a tightly packed first aid kit to water purification tablets, rope, an emergency shelter, and a heavy black satellite phone that could call for help from anywhere in North America. "If we get into trouble, this will save us," she said proudly, holding up the device. "Full battery. Perfect signal. We will be fine." They agreed to meet at Aiden's apartment at dawn. It was their last weekend together before the world demanded their attention elsewhere, and none of them realized it would also be their last time standing in the safe, familiar glow of city lights. By the time they loaded their gear into Aiden's car, the air outside was cold and sharp, the kind of morning that promised clear skies and bright sun once the day began. As they drove east, the city faded behind them. Highway lanes narrowed, buildings disappeared, and trees grew denser on both sides. By mile marker 42, their cell phones lost signal entirely. It felt like they had been cut off from the world. When they finally reached the pullout that served as the forgotten trailhead, they found it exactly as Sofia described. Overgrown bushes clawed at an old gravel lot, and there it was, barely visible through the tangled branches, a weathered wooden sign, its faded paint still warning in large letters. No entry. Dangerous conditions. They laughed nervously and posed for one last picture at the trailhead, all three of them smiling with that ominous sign behind them. That photograph would later become the image burned into news reports and documentaries everywhere. The timestamp read 10:28 a.m. September 17, 2016. Then, without another word, they stepped past the sign and disappeared into the wilderness. What they could not have known was that this simple decision would leave behind one of the strangest mysteries search teams had ever seen, and it would all begin with what they found an hour into the hike. The forest welcomed them with quiet. The air was cool and damp, carrying that sharp scent of pine needles and earth. At first, the trail was clear despite more than a decade of neglect. Sunlight filtered through the tall trees and broken beams, painting golden streaks on the ground. Their boots crunched softly on fallen leaves as if no one had walked this way in years. Aiden held his GoPro high, recording every step. Noah launched his drone between breaks, sending it soaring above the treetops, capturing sweeping shots of endless green hills and snow-tipped ridges stretching across the horizon. An hour in, they reached the reason Hollow Ridge Trail had been abandoned. The ground simply ended. Before them was a massive landslide zone, hundreds of feet wide, filled with jagged stone and the twisted remains of old safety rails. The official path was gone, replaced by a sheer drop into broken rock. They stood at the edge, staring in silence at the destruction. It was Noah who broke the quiet. This must have been why they closed it. No way anyone could cross this. But Sofia was already scanning the slope with sharp eyes. She pointed higher up the hillside, where a faint line of disturbed brush and cleared branches hinted at something unusual. It was narrow, steep, and clearly unofficial, but it looked like someone had used it recently. Without hesitation, she started climbing. Come on. Someone has been keeping this clear. This has to be the way. Aiden hesitated, glancing back toward the safer, familiar trail behind them. His camera captured it all, the ruined ridge, the faint path above, and Sofia steadily moving forward. Against his better judgment, he followed. Noah sighed, packed up his drone, and brought up the rear. The climb was exhausting, but once they reached the top, it all felt worth it. The view spread out endlessly before them, an untouched wilderness without a single road, building, or sign of human life. Sofia smiled like a child. This is perfect. Look at this. By late afternoon, they had cleared the ridge entirely and were deep in unmarked forest. The air felt different here, heavier somehow, as if the world had gone quieter. They found a small clearing, flat and surrounded by tall pines, with a crystal-clear stream running nearby. It was so pristine that it felt unreal, like it had been waiting for them all along. Noah launched his drone again and called out that there was not another soul for miles. It was the perfect campsite. They set up their tent, gathered firewood, and as dusk fell, the whole forest glowed in shades of gold and deep orange. Aiden filmed every moment. Sofia checked the satellite phone again, holding it up with a grin. Full battery. Full signal. We are safer here than most people are in the city. Under the stars, they sat around a fire, telling stories and laughing, their voices echoing softly into the night. The last audio from any of their devices recorded at 11:36 p.m. was quiet conversation mixed with the crackle of the fire. After that, nothing but silence. The next morning, none of their families could have known that they would never hear from them again, and the first signs of trouble would not come until 2 days later. Sunday morning came and went, and by Monday evening, none of them had returned. At first, their families assumed it was just a delay, maybe they had stayed an extra night to enjoy the wilderness. But when calls went unanswered and messages stayed unread, worry began to spread like wildfire. By Tuesday morning, panic had set in. Aiden was supposed to be back for his graduate orientation, Noah had a meeting he would never miss, and Sofia's project lead reported she had not checked in. Their families contacted authorities, and by Wednesday morning, the first search and rescue team arrived at Hollow Ridge Trail. Aiden's car was right where they left it. The doors were unlocked, extra supplies still visible through the windows, and nothing appeared disturbed. From there, searchers followed the old trail easily. They found footprints that matched their boots, small pieces of litter like energy bar wrappers that aligned with what their families confirmed they carried. Everything seemed routine until they reached the landslide. The search team stopped. The official path ended there, sheer and dangerous, just as the reports from 2003 had described. But hours of careful examination eventually led them to the same faint, steep bypass the hikers had taken. Aiden's GoPro footage, later recovered from his online backup, confirmed it step by step. Beyond the bypass, the search became harder. Evidence was sparse, and the wilderness grew thicker and stranger. They eventually discovered the campsite in the same meadow Aiden, Noah, and Sofia had recorded. It was untouched beauty, and it felt unsettlingly empty. The campsite was textbook. A burned fire ring contained the right amount of ash. The grass was pressed flat where a tent had clearly been pitched. Nearby, signs of buried food scraps followed leave no trace rules perfectly. Everything about it screamed experienced campers. But there were no backpacks. No clothing. No sleeping bags. No gear of any kind. It was as if the three of them had simply stood up, walked away from their perfectly prepared camp, and never returned. By Thursday, the search expanded. Helicopters flew overhead scanning the terrain. K-9 teams moved through the dense woods. Specialized teams scaled ravines and cliffs. Thermal imaging drones scoured deep valleys and shadowed crevices. For days, they combed through miles of forest, expanding the grid wider and wider until it covered nearly 50 square miles. Yet nothing came back. No broken branches suggesting panic. No scraps of fabric. No human remains. Just wilderness, stretching endlessly and silent as if it had swallowed them whole. Searchers noticed something strange. K-9 units would catch a faint scent trail, follow it into the trees for several hundred yards, and then lose it completely. Every time it ended abruptly, without reason. One dog stopped so suddenly it refused to move forward, whining and pulling back as if afraid. Even geological teams brought in ground-penetrating radar, but all they uncovered were minor caves, none deep enough to hide anyone. The forest seemed endless, but it hid nothing tangible. After 6 weeks, hundreds of volunteers, and nearly $500,000 spent, officials made the heartbreaking call to suspend active searching. Sheriff Elaine Porter announced that there was no sign of foul play, no sign of wildlife involvement, and no indication of where the hikers had gone. On paper, it was ruled an accident. Privately, many searchers admitted it felt nothing like an accident. One of them later said quietly to a reporter, "Usually, you find something, a boot, a torn jacket, anything. This time we found nothing. It was like they were never there at all." Their families refused to accept it. They organized volunteer searches monthly. They hired private investigators and funded helicopter scans. But years passed, and hope faded. Then, exactly 3 years later, everything changed when 2 weekend hikers found something deep in the forest that no one could explain. It was October of 2019 when 2 hikers, Emily Hart and Daniel Reyes, decided to explore an unmarked section of the Cascade Wilderness, miles away from any official trail. They were experienced with off-route hiking, used to rough terrain and dense forests. That weekend, they followed a narrow creek bed that wound deeper and deeper into untouched land, a place even park rangers rarely ventured into. The further they went, the stranger the forest felt. After nearly 5 hours of hiking, they stumbled upon something that made them stop in their tracks. It was a grove unlike anything they had ever seen. The trees there were twisted unnaturally. Tall pines that should have grown straight instead bent and curled like spirals. Some formed perfect loops, their tops curving down toward the ground in ways that defied logic. Emily described it later as beautiful but deeply unsettling, like something out of a dream that felt wrong the longer you stared at it. They stepped cautiously into the grove, studying the warped trunks. The ground was soft with thick moss, eerily quiet without even the sound of birds. Then Emily saw it. A splash of red high among the branches. She froze, pointed, and Daniel followed her gaze. Hanging from a tree branch was a backpack. Faded, weather-stained, but unmistakably out of place in that silent grove. They scrambled closer, and as soon as Emily saw it, she knew it was not just any pack. It was an Osprey model, red with a distinct design on its straps. That same description had been plastered across missing person posters 3 years earlier. It belonged to Sofia Ramirez. Their hands shook as they used Emily's satellite communicator to contact authorities. Within hours, a Ranger helicopter arrived, carrying a team who secured the site and carefully retrieved the bag. It was confirmed on the spot. This was Sofia's backpack, identified by a personalized tag with her initials still barely visible. But its location raised immediate questions. The grove was over 15 miles from the last known campsite, across terrain so rugged that even expert hikers would need several days to navigate it. Search teams had never come near this area. There was no logical path linking it to where the 3 friends were last seen. How did it get there? And then came the most baffling part. When investigators unzipped the backpack, they expected signs of years in the wilderness. Instead, it looked as though it had been placed there yesterday. The zippers worked perfectly. Inside, every item was dry and intact. A flashlight switched on instantly. 2 protein bars remained sealed and still within expiration dates. A half-filled water bottle contained clear water, fresh enough to drink. Most unsettling of all was the satellite phone. It was fully charged. Untouched. Completely functional. And yet, there was no record of it ever being powered on. In 3 years, not a single button had been pressed. Technicians examined it immediately. The battery should have long since drained, but somehow it remained at full capacity. Then they accessed its GPS logs, and that was when everything shifted from strange to unexplainable. The device had recorded one final ping. September 18, 2016, at 3:47 a.m. But instead of normal coordinates, it displayed only one phrase, unknown origin. GPS does not work that way. A device either logs coordinates or it fails to connect. This reading broke every rule of navigation technology. Investigators hiked to where the signal should have been. They found nothing unusual. Just forest. Ordinary and silent. Experts began studying the grove itself. Botanists confirmed that the trees showed stress and growth patterns impossible to explain naturally. The curves and spirals followed precise mathematical patterns as though shaped intentionally over decades. Soil tests revealed high concentrations of rare minerals not found anywhere else in the region. There were no caves, no ruins, nothing that explained why Sofia's pack was hanging there like it had been placed on display. As the story broke, it drew national attention again. Theories exploded online. Some believed the friends had gotten hopelessly lost and wandered there, but the pristine condition of the gear destroyed that theory. Others whispered about hidden tunnels, lost hikers taken by someone or something, or even stranger explanations no one wanted to say out loud. And just when it seemed the case had reached its strangest point, one phone call would turn it from mystery into something far more disturbing. The discovery of Sofia's backpack sent shockwaves through the investigation, but it was the satellite phone that drew the most attention. Experts could not explain how it had remained fully charged after 3 years in the wilderness. When it was examined in detail, they found something even stranger. There was no sign it had ever been turned on. No calls made. No messages sent. No attempt to even access its functions. Technicians dug deeper and uncovered its GPS log. Only one entry remained, recorded at 3:47 a.m. on September 18, 2016, hours after the three friends were last heard around their campfire. But instead of standard coordinates, it showed the words unknown origin. No numbers. No location. Just that. GPS devices do not create unknown origin readings. They either fail entirely or provide coordinates. This one broke every rule of the technology. Specialists attempted to pinpoint the last known location anyway, overlaying maps and calculating paths from the campsite. Teams hiked to the exact spot where a signal would normally place it. There was nothing. Just empty forest. No tracks. No disturbed soil. No sign anyone had been there in years. Meanwhile, other experts examined the twisted grove where the backpack was found. Botanists studied the trees and confirmed they had grown in patterns that should have been impossible. The bends and spirals matched precise mathematical ratios, as though shaped deliberately over time. Soil tests revealed rare earth minerals concentrated in amounts that did not match any natural sample in the Cascades. Geologists used ground-penetrating radar and found nothing hidden beneath the surface. The deeper they looked, the stranger it became. The pristine condition of the items inside the pack baffled even seasoned investigators. It was as if someone had taken perfect care of them and then placed the bag in the grove to be discovered exactly when it was. Then came a new shock. Forensic analysis revealed that the satellite phone's battery had not just retained its charge, it showed signs of having been kept at a stable voltage the entire time, as if it had been maintained in ideal conditions rather than left exposed to the elements. Someone, or something, had kept it perfect. Public speculation exploded. Some argued that the three hikers had stumbled onto something hidden in those woods, something not meant to be found. Others believed the pack was a planted distraction, intended to confuse and lead searchers away from the truth. The mystery seemed unsolvable. But then, just 1 week after the backpack was found, a single phone call would send the case spiraling into an even darker and far more chilling direction. 1 week after the discovery of Sofia's backpack, Aiden's mother, Laura Clark, was sitting at her kitchen table. The television was muted, and she was sorting through emails and messages from people who claimed to have tips about her son. Most were nothing but false hope. Then her landline rang. The caller ID displayed a blocked number. Laura almost did not answer. After 3 years of prank calls and cruel hoaxes, she hesitated. But something compelled her to pick it up. There was silence. Then static. And then a voice. For 3 seconds, she heard her son. Aiden's voice, trembling and distorted by a faint electronic crackle, saying only 5 words, "I do not know where we are." And then the call cut out. No background noise. No time to respond. Just dead air. Laura froze, the phone still pressed to her ear. She replayed the voicemail over and over, shaking as she listened. She knew that voice. Every parent does. It was him. The FBI immediately became involved. They ran advanced voice recognition software on the recording, and it confirmed with 98% certainty that the voice belonged to Aiden Clark. But tracing the call was another story entirely. The number had never existed. It was routed through a chain of servers bouncing across different countries, Canada, Germany, even the Philippines, before disappearing into encrypted systems that no agency could penetrate. Telecommunications experts confirmed that no carrier had ever issued the originating number. Attempts to call it back resulted in a disconnected line message. Audio engineers studied the voicemail closely. They confirmed it was crystal clear, far cleaner than any call that should have come from a wilderness area with no towers. There was no wind, no forest sounds, no interference at all. Instead, subtle echoes in the voice suggested Aiden had been speaking from within a closed space, possibly underground, with hard surfaces surrounding him. Even more disturbing were faint harmonic distortions in the audio. Specialists explained these were not natural artifacts. The voice had been processed through a digital filter unlike any used in standard telecommunications. One expert said it was as if the call originated outside normal infrastructure entirely. Meanwhile, the families were overwhelmed. Laura described how hearing her son's voice after 3 years was both hope and heartbreak. If he was alive, where was he? Why had it taken so long for any contact? And why only those 5 words? Theories spread faster than ever. Some believed it was a cruel hoax by someone with advanced skills. Others argued it was proof the hikers had been alive all this time, trapped somewhere unreachable. The encrypted routing of the call suggested someone or something with resources far beyond an ordinary prank. Investigators dug into every lead. They scoured records of cave systems in the Cascades. They reviewed old geological surveys, even military activity in the region. Nothing matched. Search teams revisited the areas near the Twisted Grove. There were no footprints, no evidence of any recent human presence. The voicemail raised an unsettling question that no one could ignore. If Aiden really spoke those words, and if he was alive at the time of the call, how did he reach out from a place no one could trace? The investigation only grew stranger when another discovery linked directly back to that grove and hinted that something far older and far more unusual might be hidden deep within those woods. Following the voicemail, investigators turned their full attention back to the grove where Sofia's backpack had been found. If there were answers, they believed they were hidden there. Botanists, geologists, and technology experts returned to the site with equipment far more advanced than before. The twisted trees were the first focus. Dr. Karen Ellison, a forest pathologist with 2 decades of experience, studied their growth patterns. Her findings stunned even her team. The trees had not been damaged by storms or heavy winds. Instead, they had grown deliberately bent and spiraled over decades, their rings showing no trauma. They had twisted while remaining perfectly healthy. She explained that it was as if some unknown force had guided their growth, shaping them into curves and loops with near mathematical precision. Meanwhile, soil samples revealed something equally baffling. Analysis showed concentrations of rare earth elements far higher than any natural levels in the region. These minerals were not toxic, but they did not belong there. Their distribution was uneven, forming strange clusters in geometric patterns around the grove, as if intentionally placed. Ground-penetrating radar was brought in next. The scans returned unexpected anomalies, hollow cavities beneath the grove, long and narrow, stretching deeper than the equipment could accurately measure. At first, they were thought to be natural limestone caves, but their shapes were too straight, too engineered. Some extended at perfect right angles, while others appeared to branch off symmetrically like corridors. Experts lowered specialized seismic equipment into one of the largest detected cavities. The reading suggested vast empty space below, larger than any known cave in the Cascades. Yet there were no surface entrances. Every visible inch of the grove was sealed by untouched earth and thick roots. Then came the most chilling discovery. Photogrammetry experts mapped the grove and overlaid the curvature of the trees onto a grid. The result revealed precise geometric alignments, angles and ratios that mirrored advanced mathematical constants. It was as though the grove had been designed intentionally, following rules that were far from random. Dr. Ellison admitted something unusual during a press briefing. She said the pattern reminded her of sacred geometry, the kind often seen in ancient architecture and religious sites worldwide. But here it was, deep in the wild, with no evidence of human history anywhere nearby. As news of these findings broke, speculation spiraled further. Some argued the hikers had accidentally stumbled upon something ancient, hidden deliberately and never meant to be found. Others pointed to the untraceable voicemail and suggested a connection between the subterranean anomalies and Aiden's echo-filled voice. The FBI began working quietly with specialists outside their usual scope, including geophysicists and cryptography analysts, though they never revealed why. The families watched helplessly as the investigation shifted further into secrecy. It was no longer treated as a standard missing persons case. The unanswered question became louder with each passing day. If something unnatural existed beneath that grove, was it connected to the hiker's disappearance, and could it explain how a voice reached out years later from nowhere that should exist? Despite years of investigation, endless search efforts, and experts from every field studying the evidence, nothing could explain what had happened to Aiden Clark, Noah Patel, and Sofia Ramirez. No remains were ever found. No additional belongings surfaced. It was as if the forest itself had erased them. The voicemail remained the most haunting piece of evidence. Audio specialists insisted it was real, not fabricated, and that it matched Aiden's voice beyond reasonable doubt. The clarity, the faint echo, the cryptic words, every detail pointed to a man speaking from somewhere enclosed, isolated, and unknown. But without coordinates or any signal trace, it was as though the voice came from nowhere on Earth. The grove became the focus of countless theories. Some claimed it was a natural phenomenon misunderstood by science, while others believed it was a remnant of something ancient, intentionally hidden and never meant to be disturbed. The geometric patterns in the twisted trees, the rare minerals in the soil, and the massive underground cavities fed a wave of speculation that ranged from secret government facilities to far stranger ideas that most were too hesitant to say out loud. The families never gave up. Laura Clark kept a voicemail recording of her son's voice on her phone and played it every night, believing it was proof that he was still alive somewhere. Sofia's brother hiked into the Cascades nearly every month, convinced he would find a clue everyone else had missed. Noah's parents hired private search teams long after official funding had ended, scouring the wilderness for even a single trace. But as time went on, even the most determined efforts brought nothing new. Rangers who patrolled near Hollow Ridge Trail reported that the forest felt different around the grove, describing a strange quiet and an unshakable feeling of being watched, though they admitted this could be nothing more than nerves after everything that had happened there. The FBI eventually stopped releasing public updates. The case shifted into a category few ever hear about, stored away in classified files that only deepened the sense of unease. And yet, the mystery continued to grow online. Forums, podcasts, and late-night discussions kept the story alive. Some shared blurry drone footage of the grove, others tried to decode the GPS reading from the satellite phone, and a few insisted that the voicemail contained hidden frequencies beyond human hearing. Nothing conclusive ever emerged. Every answer only created new questions. And then there were the hikers who found Sofia's backpack. In an interview, Emily Hart said something that unsettled everyone who heard it. She claimed that when they first entered the grove, she felt like they were being led there. Like something wanted them to find it. When asked why, she paused for a long moment before saying quietly that it did not feel like they had discovered it by accident at all. To this day, no one knows what really happened in that wilderness, why those 3 hikers vanished without a trace, or who made that chilling phone call. But perhaps the most disturbing question of all is this: if the voice was real, and if Aiden truly spoke those words, where exactly was he calling from? Years have passed since the disappearance of Aiden Clark, Noah Patel, and Sofia Ramirez, yet their story refuses to fade. It lingers like an echo in the wilderness, haunting those who followed the case closely and chilling those who stumbled across it for the first time. The unanswered questions hang heavy, impossible to shake. Why was Sofia's backpack perfectly preserved in a grove miles from their last known campsite? How could a satellite phone remain fully charged and untouched for 3 years? What force twisted those trees into impossible shapes and left geometric patterns in the forest floor? And most haunting of all, how did a voice belonging to a man declared missing years earlier reach his mother's phone through a number that never existed? Every expert who worked on the case admits the same thing. The evidence does not align with anything ordinary. The search teams never found signs of an accident. No torn fabric. No scattered equipment. No remains. It was as though the forest swallowed them and left nothing behind but questions. The grove itself is now marked as restricted land. Officially, it is because of unstable ground, but those who know about the case suspect there is more to it. Hikers who have ventured too close describe an eerie silence where no birds sing and no wind moves through the branches. Some claim compasses spin wildly near the grove, while others report electronic devices draining battery faster than normal. None of this has been officially documented, but those rumors only fuel the unease. Meanwhile, the families still hold out hope. They organize yearly vigils at Hollow Ridge Trailhead, leaving flowers and handwritten notes at the faded warning sign where the three friends were last photographed smiling together. For them, the story is not over. They believe their children are still out there somewhere, waiting to be found. Online communities dissect every piece of evidence, frame by frame. They slow down the voicemail, they analyze the tree formations, they pore over maps of the Cascades searching for caves or abandoned tunnels. No definitive answers ever come, only more theories and speculation. Some believe that whatever happened to Aiden, Noah, and Sofia is not unique. They point to other unexplained disappearances in remote forests across the world, suggesting there may be a pattern too large for anyone to see clearly. Others think the voicemail was never meant to reach us, that it was a mistake, a brief crack in whatever barrier separates those hikers from the world they once knew. No matter what you believe, one thing is certain. Something happened out there in those woods that defies every explanation. And if the voicemail is to be believed, Aiden was right. They truly did not know where they were. But maybe the real question is even darker. What if the place they ended up in was never on any map to begin with? The truth about Aiden Clark, Noah Patel, and Sofia Ramirez came unexpectedly, and it was nothing like anyone imagined. 2 years after the voicemail, a joint investigation involving geologists and a specialized underground rescue team uncovered a hidden entrance less than a mile from the Twisted Grove. It had been buried under decades of debris, concealed by fallen trees and erosion, invisible to even the most careful searchers. When they cleared the entrance and descended, they found a vast cavern system unlike anything documented in the Cascades. The walls bore markings, symbols carved deeply into stone, their meaning unknown but arranged with precision that suggested purpose. The tunnels stretched endlessly, far deeper than any natural cave should exist. And then they found it. At the deepest chamber, lying side by side, were the remains of 3 people. DNA confirmed what everyone had feared. It was Aiden, Noah, and Sofia. They were discovered in a state that stunned investigators. Their gear was neatly stacked nearby, untouched. Their clothes were undamaged. There were no signs of a struggle or trauma. They looked as though they had simply lain down and never woken up. Nearby, on a flat rock, rested Sofia's satellite phone, still fully charged. When powered on, it displayed only one unsent message draft, dated September 18, 2016, at 3:48 a.m. It read, "We are not alone here." The markings on the cavern walls were studied by linguists and cryptographers. None could decode them. Some resembled constellations, others ancient geometric designs. The rare earth minerals found in the grove above matched those deep in the cavern, as if whatever force warped the forest above had seeped upward from this place. The official report concluded that the hikers likely became trapped after discovering the entrance, losing their way in the labyrinth and succumbing to exhaustion. But the details never aligned. Their equipment showed no signs of desperation. The neat arrangement of their belongings suggested calm acceptance rather than panic. The voicemail became clearer in hindsight. Acoustic analysis proved it had been recorded from within that same cavern, matching the echo signature perfectly. Aiden's voice had traveled out somehow, routed through unknown means, reaching his mother 3 years after his death. No explanation could be given for how this was even possible. At the final press briefing, Sheriff Elaine Porter spoke with quiet gravity. She admitted the investigation had uncovered things she could not explain, things beyond standard procedure or science. The site of the cavern was sealed permanently afterward, declared unstable and dangerous. The families held a private ceremony near Hollow Ridge Trailhead. Flowers were laid by the weathered warning sign where it had all begun. Laura Clark held her son's recovered watch in her hands as tears fell silently. For them, closure came not from answers, but from finally knowing where their children rested. The wilderness has since returned to silence. The grove remains off limits, the twisted trees still standing like silent guardians of whatever lies below. And even now, hikers passing near Hollow Ridge speak of an unshakable quiet, of a feeling that they are not alone, as though the forest itself remembers. If you are still watching this story, it means it truly held you until the very end. That means it deserves your like and subscribe. Please help me reach 1,000 likes because this is a dare from my mother, and you can help me win it. It is completely free. Also, tell me in the comments from which city you are watching this story. I cannot wait to read where you all are from.